So if you watched a lot of my videos, you know that one of my biggest weaknesses is that ADHD tendency to flip around and change direction and to change my mind. In some ways, we can argue it's a positive because being able to question your beliefs and change your minds can also be a good thing. But in some ways, I've lost a lot of momentum by randomly changing shit. So it's a bit of a weakness in some areas. But if you've observed me personally for a while, you might have been thinking like, yeah, this motherfucker changes his mind and changes the direction a lot. How has he been so consistent in a few things? Bodybuilding for 10 years straight, even with pretty bad genetics and a bad starting point, like the 20 kg barbell was too heavy for me with most exercises. So I started way weaker than the average guy. YouTube, on my main channel for a solid 1.5, 2 years, I posted daily the same type of video over and over and over and over again. Of course, eventually I changed it, but for that period, super consistent, didn't change the direction at all. Kickboxing the last like 3 months, super consistent, didn't change the direction. Why in some areas have I been super consistent and in others I have changed the direction and basically reset my progress, reset my momentum? This is going to be like a case study on me, but of course this is relatable to you. If you kind of relate to that ADHD tendency of just changing your mind, switching direction, flipping from like one business model to the next business model, thinking that this girl is amazing, then thinking that she's a piece of shit, and thinking that that girl's amazing, then thinking that she's a piece of shit. If you're someone who like flips around a lot like me, hopefully this can help you. So there's a few ideas that I've had. Why have I stayed so consistent in some things, but I've flipped around in many others? And just as a disclaimer, I'm not sure if this is like clinical diagnosis of ADHD. I've never actually been tested for it. It just seems like it's a ADHD tendency. That's just what we'll define it as, but it might not be like the actual real ADHD clinical diagnosis, whatever. So how do we handle the tendency to flip around and jump around? I think it's actually a pretty good thing in the very early days before you've made any progress in a certain field. Let's say we are just starting off business. Let's say we want to make an online business. Almost every guy who becomes successful in the online business space has actually tried like 5 businesses to begin with. It's actually a good thing to flip around and to basically shop around and see, trying this business. Okay, Iman Gaji says to make an agency. Hamza says to become like an influencer, like a cult leader. Andrew Tate says, I don't know, his program, it's like drop shipping and crypto and whatever. And this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy, and this guy. What would be logically the best way for you to find which business would be actually the right one for you? Really think about it. What would be the best way? It would be to try all of them. The kind of guy who would try all of them would be a bit of this ADHD flipping around kind of thing, where you try dropshipping, you give it a really good try for like a week or so, then you lose a bit of interest because you're like, yeah, you know what, it's like, it's kind of pathetic and soulless, and there's not one dropshipper who's ever existed who has a soul, because it's such a shit fucking gay little business model where I'm just being the middleman for this shitty Chinese product for my retarded Western customers. You're like, yeah, this would be a fucking shit life, and I don't want to be a soulless businessman. So then you give that up. Then you try agency, especially with the arbitrage, where basically you're just outsourcing it to some fucking Indians, and you're like, oh yeah, this is pretty soulless as well. Like, this is a pretty shit business model as well. I'm just biased because I'm going to tell you that every business model is shit apart from mine, which is like just become like a teacher online, teach what you've learned, and then sell an educational product, which is, by the way, what every guy online is actually doing. Even though they recommend you to do something else, they're all doing the same business model that I recommend. So that's a separate point. But yeah, so then you try this one and this one and this one and this one. If you're smart, you just say to yourself, okay, my goal is to make at least $1 in each business model within 48 to 72 hours of trying it. So you set on a timer for 72 hours and you say, okay, I've got to get 1 sale in dropshipping before then. So you've got this deadline where you're pushing fast and you're able to see what it's like. You get your first sale and you really know like 10 times more than if you just kept on watching videos or whatever. Then you flip over to the next thing and you try YouTube and you're like, okay, I'm going to get to either one sale from the sort of content creation to a product, or I'm going to get to, I don't know, 5, 10 subscribers within 72 hours. I'm just going to figure it out. I'm going to make 2 videos, 3 videos and see what the process is like. Then you flip over to agency, then you flip over to e-commerce, then flipping, and all these different models. And you can see how you can use the sort of ADHD sort of spray and pray mindset to actually help you. And in the same with dating as well. Let's say you're not dating, like you don't have a wife or anything, you don't have a girlfriend. Does it serve you to go on one date with a girl and commit fully to her? No. It sounds cool to do that. That's like wholesome as fuck. But actually, no. It actually serves you to go on hundreds of dates. I know that sounds crazy. I'm not saying to have sex with these girls and be a degenerate, but it serves you to talk to and get to know hundreds of girls. Don't even get intimate with them. Don't even kiss them. But to really start to figure out who you like spending time with, whose values, whose conversation turns you off, not just in a lustful way, but just like psychologically and spiritually and in an intimate way. Because then you're getting experience. And it's the same with, let's say, exercise. Why not go and try like every form of exercise before you get super consistent in one? So you go and lift some weights for like a week and you learn like a normal week workout split. And you're like, okay, this is what weightlifting is like. Then maybe you do a bit more of a strength training protocol. Then maybe a bit more of a hypertrophy bodybuilding style. Then you try calisthenics. Then you try CrossFit. You try everything for like a month, 1 week at a time. And then you realize, oh yeah, you know what? CrossFit was the most fun and I could get the most consistent, and I feel like I've got a bit of a genetic advantage to it for some reason. I was just pretty good as a beginner compared to the other things that I tried, like calisthenics I sucked at. And you're like, okay, I could actually get into CrossFit. Do you see how at the earlier levels, when you're at like level 1 in the field that you're thinking about, the ADHD tendency to flip around and try new things is actually beneficial, as long as you have this experimenter kind of mindset of like, which one am I gonna like? The problem becomes when you keep the ADHD tendency, but you've actually started to make a bit of progress. So now we're talking, okay, you're 6 months into weightlifting, and now you're randomly going to go and do calisthenics, or you're 6 months into being a content creator, YouTuber, and now you're thinking like, oh yeah, I'll go post to a different platform, or I'll go like, oh, I should like, become a coach, or I should start up an agency as well. You need 7 side hustles. Like, what the fuck, bro? Now this is a bad thing, because you've already got a bit of momentum. And you're probably going to reset the progress if you just start something new. I have this guy, this kind of like a friend, Andrew Kirby, who was like a personal development YouTuber a few years ago. Super intelligent guy. And one time I texted him saying like, what do you think I should improve on? Because he knew me fairly well. And he sent me this text, which will be relevant here, where he said, to be slower in my decisions. He said, in the earlier days, you have to be like a speedboat, constantly changing direction to figure out which path to take. But once you've already got leverage and a bit of progress, you're more like a cruise ship, where now changing direction is actually way more costly, because it's better for you to just make slow progress, but consistently to the long direction you're trying to go towards. Imagine that analogy, like in the earlier days, be a speedboat so you can move around quick and figure out things that you need. You can go to this direction, try that, oh, it doesn't work. That direction, try that, doesn't work. This direction, whatever, super quick. But once you've got a bit of progress and you've been consistent in something, that's when it's so much more costly for you to switch around direction. Like a big cruise boat, for them to randomly turn around and change their direction would be fucking slow and impractical. And imagine if they did that constantly. A speedboat that changes direction, there's not much of a cost because you can just quickly change direction again. A cruise ship that changes direction is a lot of cost because you've lost a lot of that momentum that was going in that area. The longer that you've been going in a direction, the less quickly you should completely change that direction and allow your ADHD tendency to change things up. So this is the lesson I learned over the last few months, particularly, because even though when I had this text conversation with Andrew Kirby, I took it seriously, but I didn't really act on it. So I kept on acting out with this ADHD tendency kind of way. What I've done, the mindset that now works for me, which I keep in my mind, is iterate, don't change. That's the phrase that I say to myself, and you might want to write that down if you feel like this is a weakness for you. Iterate, don't change. Iterate means to go from 1 to 1.1. It's basically take the same thing and inside of that same thing, make it slightly better. Changing is to go from 1 to 2, or let's say 0 to 1. Do you see the difference, right? So, for example, iteration will be you date the same girl, but you make that relationship better. Changing would be that you break up with that girl and get a different girlfriend. Iteration would be that you have your business, like let's say you're an influencer, you're a YouTuber, and you're still a YouTuber, but you're trying to become better at being at YouTube. So for example, you get coaching on your speaking skills. That's iteration. It's the same thing, but we're trying to do it better. Changing would be you saying, okay, I'm not a YouTuber anymore. I'm now going to do drop shipping. I'm now going to change this thing. I'm going to change this thing. And this is the lesson I wish I learned like a year ago, because I had a great product. I had a product called Adonis School that had up to 2,000 monthly paying members, like subscribers, which is a lot, bro, like $250,000 a month. And if I iterated on that and kept it the same, but just tried to make each part inside of it slightly better, we might be on thousands of extra people right now, maybe $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a month. My mistake was that I didn't iterate, I changed. What does this look like? So in my product, iteration would have been me, for example, going over like the materials, like the training programs we had inside of it and thinking, oh, I could re-record this module so it's better. Changing was me going into the product and completely changing what was inside, not just making it better, but completely changing it to the point that I even went in there one day and restricted and said like to everyone like, oh yeah, we're just gonna talk about business in here from now on, instead of it being like all topics, which is a big change. And then a few months after that, I just randomly went in and said, oh, we're just going to talk about dating from now on. And again, that was a big change. And so with these big changes, most likely, especially if you've got a bit of leverage, there's more of a chance for you to fuck something up than for you to improve something. Like when you change something, there's actually a big cost and a big chance that it's worse than what you have right now. When you try to iterate, like for example, you're in a relationship and you try and improve the same relationship, there's quite a big chance that you're going to improve the relationship. But if you change the relationship, if you break up with your girl and try and get a new girlfriend, there's actually a big chance that it's worse than the previous relationship, right? It's the same with like any big change in your business, in your career, in your exercise style, whatever. So I started to recognize just in the last few months the cost of changing. There's iteration where you try and make it better inside the same bucket, and changing where you change the bucket entirely. And if you've already got a pretty good thing going, be very scared and very hesitant to change entirely. So I'll give you one more example before we end off the video. I'm kickboxing almost every day, or twice a day now with my coach. And when I first started training, I kept on changing around our timings. I kept on trying to over-optimize and changing and saying, oh, let's train at 7, let's train at 8:30, because then I can read here and I can do this, a bit of autistic with my schedule. And my friend, my coach, James, didn't really ever argue, because I'm paying the sessions and stuff. So he's like, yeah, sure, okay, yeah, I can do 8. Oh yeah, I can't do that time, but I can do this time, whatever. But when I said to him about this was one of my biggest weaknesses, and he kind of held me accountable. I said to him, it's I don't even realize why I do that bullshit where imagine we've got our sessions at 8 and 2 p.m. and I'm constantly saying oh bro, can you do 1:30 instead? Because that way I can I'll eat this meal at that time, and I'm just over optimizing. And what I realized was the cost of changing was actually starting to fuck up the progress that I was making more than any benefit from potentially changing it in the first place. You're literally just sacrificing progress by changing. You are changing for the pursuit of progress, but it's often leading to less progress. So the final example is I was watching this sleep podcast between Chris Williamson and Matthew Walker. It's on Chris Williamson's channel. It's just recent, in January or maybe December of 2024. And Matthew Walker's like this sleep expert who tells you about this new study, which is super interesting. Your regularity in your sleep is actually more important than your quantity of sleep. Basically, how consistently you go to bed and wake up is actually more important than how long you sleep. So there's such a power in going to bed within the same 10-minute window and waking up within the same 10-minute window every day of the week. And when he said that, I finally got it, and I was like, I'm always changing my bedtime and my wake up time, trying to change shit, over optimize shit. And by doing that, I'm actually getting worse sleep than if I just kept it the fucking same and iterated inside of it. So my bedtime right now is 8:45. My wake up time is 6. Instead of me changing it and saying like, oh, what if I wake up at 5? What if I go to sleep at 9? Inside of that, I can sort of iterate. So for example, I can slightly change what I do before the bedtime. I won't change the bedtime, I'll keep it the same so I have the regularity, but I might watch something different before bed, or I might do something slightly different. Inside of it, I will iterate to make it better. I won't change the thing. That was the bit that clicked for me to think, yeah, you know what? Don't change shit that's already pretty good. Iterate inside of it, because when you change, you lose a lot of progress by the lack of regularity, which is a really good thing. When I heard it in the sleep podcast from this experiment, it finally clicked for me, and I was like, yeah, like when you are ADHD changing shit, it's actually more costly than if you just let it run as it is and you try to make it better from what it is instead of changing the fucking thing completely. So I hope that helps you in some ways. Maybe you've got a couple of ideas of things that you can just keep it the fucking same. Stop experimenting with your bedtime routine, your wake up routine. You know, by all means, if you're early on this journey, go ahead and give it a try just to see. But once you've changed your bedtime and your wake up time like 5 times, it's like, just fucking stick with it now for the rest of your fucking life, or at least for a few years, and your sleep will improve. And the final thing I'll quickly say is I'm actually having the best sleep of my entire life. My tracking with the Aura Ring is the highest it's ever been in my life, which is awesome. Top link in the description is my email newsletter. If you enjoy reading, just go sign up to that. You'll get emails with like practical action steps from me. Goodbye.